morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, and welcome to this month's Legerity Meet the Experts. So today we will focus on allocation. Allocation processes are often challenging, being undertaken on spreadsheet or other non-user-friendly applications. This leads to significant inefficiency, lack of control, dependency on key individuals, and little transparency, and often actually is prone to errors. So today I'm joined by Mark Miller, Legerity Head of Client Advisory, who will be answering all your questions on allocations and discuss how Legerity First provide a highly flexible, on-demand, cloud-based allocation engines to shorten month ends, establish full control, and audited enterprise allocation processes. Hi, Mark. How are you doing today?
Yep. Good morning, Nicholas. Good morning, everybody. Yep, I'm doing very well.
Great. So as a reminder for everyone listening live, you can ask all your questions in the comment section or drop us an email at info@legerityfinancials.com. And we'll do our very best to answer all your questions live. But if we can't, we'll make sure to get back to you via email. So let's start with the first question. Mark, we had this question from actually one of the past webinars that we did, and they're saying that they have many different allocations managed by different teams, and how should they cater for this kind of requirements?
Okay, well, I suppose it's going to be quite common that, within the finance department, there'll be different owners of different finance processes, and many of those may require allocations. So I suppose it's quite a common theme that we'll see within the overall allocation space. And, within our application, we have a full user access management. So that means that IT or the administrator can define for different users different things that they can see and own in the application. So it's perfectly possible for people across entities, across departments to individually own their own allocations. And then it also means that if necessary, then different teams don't have to be able to see the allocations of other teams. And that's important, for example, if you're allocating things like payroll costs, which are quite sensitive in nature. So in terms of the data, the data can be loaded through the API as part of a generic data loading process. So that could happen all at once. But if you did want to segregate the loading process, then we have full workflow management in the application powered by Apache Airflow, which means that we can define specific jobs. So individual users would have the task, for example, that they could set to run themselves or queue to load their particular set of data. So obviously that's important if you see different teams having data that may be available at different times or needs to run at different stages in the process. We also have user interface screens. So in fact, a lot of data can be managed directly through the screens. So individuals can go in and alter or change or add reference data or key pieces of information for the allocations within the GUI. And of course, again, that's under full access control. And then I think the final thing is actually running the allocation themselves. So again, we have workflow tools in the system. It's slightly separate from the sort of data loading process. And we have a whole menu of finance processes that can be kicked off individually by users. So again, people who are running allocations that are completely independent of other teams' allocations can just set those to run themselves. And of course, where you have allocations dependent on other allocations, if you like, or other processes, then users can make sure those run at the right time. So really, in summary, we have all the tools needed and full control for the users to run their own particular allocations.
And maybe to build on that, so we speak about the different teams, but there is also the concept of the allocation engine being used for more than just expense allocation. For example, allocation of non-financial metrics or those other type of allocations. What's your thoughts on using an allocation tool for that?
Yeah, well, I mean, any object can be allocated in FastPost. So cost is the most typical use case. So typically for management information or where the unit of account is different. So, a lot of costs are generated by departments, but the business is run on products. So, that would be a very common type of allocation. But at the end of the day, any balance or P&L movement can be allocated within FastPost. So it's not specific. It's not an expense allocation tool per se. It's an allocation engine. So you can actually define what you're going to allocate and then on what basis it's going to allocate. So it is independent of the nature of the item. So I suppose a lot of calculations are prepared at a very high level, like provisions, accruals, adjustments. So those would be typical candidates for allocations, and they may well go beyond expenses. Things like capital spending. Again, that can be something that is subject to an allocation to give a sort of full P&L view down to below EBITDA, or even to create different capital views of your business. But I think what's really powerful about FastPost is that we are able to hold non-financials. So as within the ledger, we have a concept of balance type, and the balance types can be defined to be non-financial information. So things like headcount or customer-related data. All these kind of non-financial information can be also allocated. That can be allocated for primary reason, such as you want to produce a P&L report with some expenses and maybe some headcount to go with it, and you want to allocate things like that. But they can also be used as drivers for allocation. So you can actually allocate non-financials, and then those outputs be used for further allocation. So quite flexible, and I think it's quite a powerful thing to be able to manage and use non-financial data to support your financial processes.
Brilliant. Actually, I got a question which you addressed a little bit, but to expand about the various allocation methodologies. Do you use? Can we do such as volume, value, and activity-based techniques? How do we handle different methodology?
Well, the tool is very flexible, and so in a way, how you set up and use it is, the limit is really around your imagination and how you can sort of think of the allocation process and apply it in the particular setting that you require. But having said that, particularly when we come to new clients, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to get your head around how these tools can be used. So we have a lot of experience in this area. So as part of providing the application, we also provide our experience and advice. And we have many experts who can help you analyze your particular case and set things up as you want. And of course, within that, we can, of course, do things like those volume, value, activity-based allocations. And as I've already mentioned, we're fully able to handle non-financial information. So the non-financial information can be held as reference data. So we do have ability to set up reference tables in the application, and those non-financials can be input into those reference tables. But also, probably more valuable from a control perspective, you can actually post non-financial data directly in the ledger, which can then, of course, be used for allocation. So, a third point is within the allocation rule itself, you can, of course, also create formulas and calculations to help with some of the more complex versions of, say, activity-based techniques. So I think, that's the answer is yes, but of course within those topics there are a lot of different flavors and the different forms of allocation, and we can do all of those with those suite of tools that I was just mentioning.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting. So now the next question actually again was something from a past webinar. We have a multi-entity allocation process where we require allocation across multiple functional entities across the group. Does our solution cater for this type of requirements?
Yeah, so I suppose that's going to be quite a common use case for groups where you have different entities. So entities could be because you've acquired different entities or running across different geographies, or maybe you're setting up different entities to run parts of your business, so service and delivery entities separate. So in that context, it's very easy to see how you might want to allocate costs across entities to create fully loaded costs from sort of transfer pricing perspective. I suppose if you have overhead units and sales type units, but then also allocating things into a head office to create sort of more consolidation type views. So there's a number of use cases around entity allocations, and within our ledger, it's kind of like a inbuilt segment in the ledger is entity, and that's one of the real powerful things of a subledger, is that you can structure your entity data in one ledger. So that's very efficient, and there's no risk really around the data because the ledger has all of that segregation inbuilt. So you can entirely segregate entity level data within the ledger. You can ensure all the controls around that data, and the user access management can mean that only relevant personnel from their particular entity can necessarily see data for that entity. So the data can be all in one ledger and it's fully secure. And what that means is that when you are then requiring to allocate across entities or take data from one particular entity, say a head office entity or a service entity, and allocate that across to the other entities, the allocation process can run across that one ledger. So it's very easy to set up entity allocations is the short answer. And the reason for that is because we can structure and hold all of the entity level data within one ledger. And of course, we have the performance associated to manage all that as well.
Okay, very interesting. Thanks. And the next question that I have is a little bit more on the impact of other technologies, and some of the more complex allocations leads to a bottleneck due to the speed of the current solution or the database running out of space. And how can you handle, therefore, this scalability type of challenge?
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned complexity in the allocation, and I suppose that's definitely a feature. So when we think about performance in finance processes, you definitely have to consider complexity. So complexity, I suppose, is where you have multiple steps, and those steps have many variables within them. So those kind of complex type formulas can drive performance issues in the process. But then also you can have volume based. So things can be complex in the sense that you're running allocations that are spreading things across many items. So I'll give you an example. So if you're trying to create an allocation at customer level and you have millions of customers, that's an allocation that's going to need to run across those many customers. So all of these things can cause issues in finance applications because there's an awful lot of processing required. And the advantage that we have in FastPost is because we're a very modern application and we're designed to run on the cloud. So the cloud is very powerful, not least because the storage in the cloud is relatively cheap. So that's good if you've got high volumes of information, but also you can request that storage and request the processing around that data on demand. So again, it's quite efficient from a cost perspective because you're only buying the resources when you actually need it, but it's also very important because you can draw on huge processing powers for particular bottlenecks in your finance process. So you wouldn't want to necessarily buy, some of the enormous servers that AWS can provide and have them sitting around all month. But with the cloud, you can look to your month-end time period, and then you can call on those IT resources at the particular point in time. I think there's another key point about our technology, which really sets us apart from some of our competitors, is that we're able to run in memory. So our application, all of our processes run in memory. So everything is written to database at the end, so it's all available for reporting, and it's very secure, and you have the full audit trail. But the actual processing itself is running in memory. So memory-related processes are much faster than where we're writing and reading information from databases. And the other useful aspect of our technology and the way it's architected is we can actually spread the processing across many nodes. So what that effectively means is you have, if you like, more than one server or more than one computer sharing the load for the processing. So again, that significantly increases performance, but also, and this is something that's also something that's sort of new in terms of the technology is you get scalability of performance. So often in the past, you might see a finance process running a bit slow, and you would think, okay, I'll upgrade my server, I'll put more processing power, but you wouldn't necessarily see the benefits of that. And the key thing about our technology is that as you add more power to the process, then you get a linear benefit. So the major advantage in something like allocations, where you are crunching awfully high amounts of data with potentially complex calculations within that as well. So as you find that you need to scale up the power behind that, you will see a corresponding benefit as you do that, which effectively means we can run something like I talked about earlier on customer level allocations for customer profitability, for example.
Okay, very interesting. Yes, the aspect of technology is definitely something very close to Legerity being born in the cloud and trying to enable the finance transformation in broader spectrum. And actually, this brings me to the last question, where if we think about Legerity, it's quite a large solution, but let's focus still on allocation. If we were to think beyond the standard balance and movement allocation, are there other use cases for the kind of functionalities within the finance processes?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something that our clients are seeing as they implement, say, for example, we have many IFRS 17 projects. As clients are seeing those compliance aspects go live, but they see what the allocation engine can do, you start to think beyond that and other areas of finance transformation, and the allocation engine is a really powerful tool to help enable that. So for example, within IFRS 17, there is something called the reinsurance loss recovery component, which is associated with reinsurance. It's quite a complex calculation and process, and the allocation engine is something that's really helped us design a very elegant solution that allows different clients to introduce their own interpretation, and therefore is a lot of use for our clients. But we can go, once you sort of see that kind of use case in action, then you can apply that to many other aspects. So we're also working with another insurer who's actually using it for their reinsurance accounting. So to save effort on the data, you can bring in the data for the underlying contracts, and since many of the reinsurance contracts directly relate, of course, to those underlying business, the rules to create the reinsurance accounting can go in parallel with the insurance accounting. So those kind of use cases are actually things that we've been working on off the back of some of our recent projects. We also see allocations being useful in consolidation, so creating the correct level of aggregation of adjustments in the consolidation process is another useful way of incorporating the allocation engine. Something a bit more obscure, I suppose, in terms of it's not a direct, you don't directly use the results, but if we're thinking about creating scenarios for budgeting and forecasting, or creating sort of risk-based views for solvency reporting, then you need to create different views off the same opening balance. So you can use the allocation engine to move your balances across different scenarios within the ledger. So creating scenarios and that ability to sort of migrate different sets of balances into those scenarios is another useful feature within your finance process. Something we see a lot in IFRS 17 and other IFRS standards is the need to identify in a dynamic way your assets and your liabilities. So you may be posting to a liability account in the chart of accounts, but it doesn't necessarily mean that account is at the reporting date in an asset or a liability position. So you can leverage the allocation engine to help with that sort of dynamic asset liability classification to underpin your reporting. And of course, by doing that in the ledger, you keep all that full audit control and transparency of how those balances have transitioned from one period to the other. And then just finally, a lot of regulatory reporting requires complex classification and of balances and balances that need to be derived from other balances, and things like capital and liquidity reporting. The allocation engine can be very useful to help with those kind of generating that kind of information. So it's really a wide tool. And as I sort of mentioned earlier on, once you get your hands on it and then you start to look at your business processes, your finance processes, the sky's the limit on suddenly the light bulb comes on. You think, actually the allocation engine would be great to fix that. And we have many instances of our clients doing exactly that.
That's very interesting and a very insightful way of thinking about allocation outside of just expense and cost allocation. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark, for all those insights. That actually brings us to the end of today's Meet the Expert session. So I just want to say a big thank you to Mark for all your insights. And maybe do you have any last word before we close?
No, just please get in touch. Thank you all for your questions. And as I said, we've got myself and we've got many in the team who are very expert in the allocation engine and how it applies to clients in different use cases. So please get in touch with us and we'll be happy to discuss your particular requirements and how we can help.
Perfect, thank you. So maybe a last word about Legerity FastPost. So FastPost is a next generation accounting rules platform. It's designed and developed for large volume, complicated data and processes. It's a cloud native, ultra high speed performance and built for the latest open source technology. Modern finance departments have complex products, high transaction volumes, and detailed accounting needs, and FastPost addresses regulatory challenges and the legacy debt of old platform while helping finance innovation today and prepare for tomorrow. So if you're interested in hearing more about Legerity FastPost, you can contact us on our website, or we can arrange a call with one of our finance transformation experts and making sure to engage with you on those type of conversation. And we also invite you to follow us on LinkedIn to receive notification for future events, webinars, and any other material related to finance transformation. So join us next November also for the next Meet the Expert session. Otherwise, contact us on our website if you have any needs. Thank you and have a great week.
FastPost is the next generation accounting rules platform. Cloud native, ultra high performance, developed using the latest open source technologies for large volumes of complicated data and processes. Finance departments are under pressure. Legacy systems are creaking, inefficient, and error-prone. Forward-looking CFOs are driving change. Finance today is more than just accounting. Multiple stakeholders, clients, regulatory challenges, and the new digital world need a single version of the truth. Granular, accounting-validated data on demand. FastPost is modular, fully integrated with open interfaces and APIs, and the ability for user-defined business rules. Setting the standard for the next generation of accounting rules and subledger technology. We shorten processing time from days or hours to minutes. Offered both as a software and platform as a service, providing flexible and rapid deployment options to match your business needs. FastPost. Finance with confidence. Legerity. It's our business to take care of yours.